It's lovely to be here and lovely to see so many people interested in this. I am OllyTones. I work at the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. I don't intend to talk about the National Data Library. Just to be clear, I was not here in Sheffield, but I was at the DAFNI conference last year when that was the topic du jour. There is a programme looking at the National Data Library and looking to take that forward, but I am not a part of that programme. I work in data policy. And some of the work we did over the last couple of years was in partnership with UKRI. Very specifically, one of our pilots was DINI as part of DAFNI, and that's, I think, one of the things that I will touch on today. I don't know whether it's often you get the kind of government perspective. There's been a lot of change in the last week, not least. When we started out these pilot projects, we were talking about a national research data cloud. That was part of the national data strategy, as was from kind of 2021. And now we're in a world of an AI opportunities action plan, which talks about high value data sets and releasing them. We've got a blueprint for modern government, which talks about how public sector data and publicly funded data should be used. And we have the National Data Library, last mention, honest. But specifically the industrial strategy is something we're really focused on because it wants to look at the value of data. And that's one of the things that I'm going to touch on as I work through this presentation. So I got it right. So at its best, data underpins and delivers scientific discovery. It can help realize public societal value and it can drive productivity, which is the link to the industrial strategy. But data access, as many of the presentations, and Sarah's particularly touched on, it's not ideal, it's not optimal. There are still challenges around it. We did, at the start of this process, a number of workshops with colleagues across all of UKRI, looking at what some of those barriers were. The big ones are there: quality infrastructure, legal and market incentives. But specifically, we found for researchers, the challenges were the discoverability of the data, sharing across disciplines, and data sharing agreements. Please don't all groan at once when I mention DSAs. So that led us to be able to secure some funding in partnership with the Treasury and UKRI to take forward some pilots. There are colleagues from the pilots here this afternoon, so it's good of them, not just DINI. And we set out to ask the question, how could a small amount of funding help you try and improve the challenges and the barriers that are faced in this? So the ones that I've touched on there, very specifically a focus on findable, accessible, interoperable and reusable, because I think that they are a positive step to moving data around. And the 4 pilots that we came up with, or that applied and were successful through the assessment process, were the Safe People Registry, the Fair Data Accelerator, DINI, and also Boost EDS. And the plan with those was not only to see if we could break down some of those barriers, but it was also to get outputs from that investment. It was to get better use, better kind of productivity within those programs and lessons for the future. And we like to think that's what we did. DCIT helped to coordinate that activity kind of over the top, which I think is probably quite a strange relationship for government to be stepping in and directly working with researchers and projects like this. But we think it worked. We worked really closely with UKRI's Digital Research Infrastructure Programme, and our collaboration is often seen as a really positive partnership between UKRI and DCIT in this space, so policy and delivery. We did some of the obvious things. We we kept our foot on the accelerator in terms of tracking the progress. We agreed a monitoring and evaluation framework, but as each pilot was different, they had to be kind of custom to meet that, but they were to a series of principles. Working with the pilots as a cohesive whole was a really positive thing to do, because it started to build that community of practice. These were 4 disparate areas that had never met, never worked together, and coming from that was really positive. We held deep dive workshops to get into those things together. And obviously, naturally, we did webinars, we did newsletters to kind of, keep people abreast of what was going on. So in terms of those outputs, they were obvious. We successfully delivered these pilots, or rather the pilots successfully delivered themselves whilst we oversaw them. And we are continuing to gather the information on what works well, and we'll touch on that now. So the pilots, in no particular order, I'll start with the Safe People Registry, which is the HDR UK one. And if you'd like to know more, I believe Emily is in the room. So if you'd like to speak about the Safe People Registry, do speak to Emily Jefferson over there. Essentially, it is a prototype researcher registry, and it also provides guidance on what a safe researcher looks like to allow access to trusted research environments. There are many, I believe, circa 100 trusted research environments within the UK, and each one has a completely different way of applying to get authorised to use that. Now, initially, the pitch was, could we have a kind of one login type system to allow accredited researchers to be able to use a login to reach those? We do admit it took time to get funding out to the project, so I think that had to be slightly de-scoped, but what came out of it in the end, ultimately, is a tool that can reduce the risk for TRE owners in people accessing them. There are legal complexities and liability concerns when it comes to accessing secure data like that. And one of the things to really shout out about their project is that they really made it understandable in terms of what TREs were. Because I'm on a university campus, so walking out and asking someone what a TRE is, they might know. But if I was walking down the street, that would be less so. So talking about it in plain English is one of the really big learning points, because I think we can obfuscate things. And as a civil servant, acronyms are both inclusive and exclusive. Next up was the Fair Data Accelerator, which was quite different because it took a social sciences approach to FAIR and how to tackle those barriers, because we often fall back on the technology. We often go, there is a technological problem here stopping people from accessing data. The reality is, what they found was there was fear, that there were no incentives, that there were real challenges socially in environments to sharing data. There was a lack of leadership to drive people to adopt those behaviors. And so, as it says there, without the social change, without encouragement, without safety, without security, and I both mean kind of emotional security and technical security, you're always going to have fear of taking these things forward. So that's one of the things that they identified. They identified a lack of leadership, but that leadership is there to provide that safety and security. And existentially, or kind of worryingly, as we know, with the rise in AI, with the rise of LLMs, the way that technology is constantly evolving, just putting these things in place once is not enough. You need to constantly evolve with the changes and the challenges that come with it. Now, DINI, one of the reasons why we're here, Data Infrastructure for National Infrastructure. They really picked up and ran with the idea of looking at how you could create a national infrastructure. As I said initially, this was predicated on the concept of a national research data cloud. And so they really got into studying what the barriers to scaling up to a national service could be. And obviously they did things like better linkages with Jasmine. I think after me, we're going to hear more about what DINI actually achieved, so I won't misrepresent. But in that, the kind of key headlines were that we learned that working with those data holders can mitigate the incentives problems. It's some of what Sarah was talking about. I think the real standout for me was the recognition of data stewardship. I think, and we see it in all domains, not just the research domain, but you have the experts or the policy people who know what the information is, what it's telling them, why they've gathered it, and then you have the technology on which that information is stored, accessed, and shared. What you sometimes need is something in the middle. You need someone with an understanding of the policy or the science or the research, and you need someone who equally, but not as deeply, understands the technology in order to make it interoperable. Because obviously across disciplines, you have very different capture of that information. That was a real standout for me, and obviously, DINI identified that an interoperability framework is a way to take that forward. Finally, Boost EDS was part of the Natural Environment Research Council, and they took on a number of different work packages to improve their services. I think the real standout there was that they delved into persistent identifiers and complex citations, and actually on the international stage, they came up with an approach to that is a kind of global first. Now, what's really interesting about that is being able to follow the value chain of the data from the instrument on which it was captured, that is tagged and appended to that piece of data as it goes through the whole life cycle, gets us to a position where you are able to follow, understand, track, and monitor the way that that data has been used, and that can help then feed into the kind of understanding of the value, not least being able to identify where it's been cited, how it's been used, and that sort of thing, which I know is really key in the research world. And we just heard it. Infrastructure is about people. I think it was someone who stood up and said during Sarah's piece, it is about people. It's about people feeling comfortable, being able to use it, talking the same language. So the three themes that we kind of captured all this together into, and there'll be 5 themes somewhere, different 3 themes, but I think they all broadly say similar things. Culture and coordination, which is the practice and the perceptions that we've drawn from the pilots. The characteristics of the data, whether that is the security, the sensitivity, that sort of thing, and the frameworks and resources. And that, I think, also includes central management and leadership of these challenges. So on culture and coordination, it's about having open governance, building that social trust. It's having those common vocabularies, both technical and non-technical, fitting into that kind of middle place. And it's about connecting people across all boundaries with skills and the ability. That social infrastructure is just as important as the technical infrastructure when working on large programs like this. On the data, good access is dependent upon the data, whether it's, as I said, the sensitivity, the quality, and the FAIR principles. I'll always fall back on those. And I know that they've moved on. People talk about, I think, Q-FAIR, because FAIR Q sounds borderline. So I'll go with Q-FAIR, although I think the FAIR principles inherently suggest that you would need quality. And obviously, being able to do things like investing in those persistent identifiers and proving where that data has come from is absolutely important. So putting the data, I haven't quite touched on that, but it's about treating the data as that foundational element. It's not just something that you do as part of the work. It is, data is part of it, and we need to design processes around that life cycle. And on frameworks and resources, it's about having organizational understanding, organizational agreement. For me, data stewardship is an absolutely important thing. We don't have it in the public sector. You know, that middle layer that I talked about is not something we have in the public sector. In government, we have the IT infrastructure, we have policy people, we have knowledge, information management, but what we don't specifically have are those people who are sat there looking at how the data could be used more effectively. A few strengths and challenges from the work that we did together. Big message there is that a modest amount of funding applied to projects really saw benefits to the way that they worked and gave us a great deal of learning, and potentially can take us into a place where we could scale those up. Those challenges persist. I won't read through that. And I think overall, going back to those kind of 3 areas, the actual key thing is in the center there, which is the whole system. It is the things that Sarah was talking about in her presentation. It is, everything should be equal in that. It's not just about the infrastructure. It's not just about the people. It is about bringing those together and thinking about it all through the lens of data and the life cycle of that data. Some of it's language. We often equate infrastructure with platforms, pipelines, cables, but what these pilots have shown us is that it's platforms, it's the policy, it's the people. It's as much about them as it is about the technology. And so for me, the stewardship roles, the communities of practice, and the shared vocabularies, bringing people together into the same conversation is how we take forward that culture. And thinking about it as a whole system means that they're all mutually dependent upon each other. Both legal, well, not both, but legal, financial, technical, and culture need to move together. And I think really, and maybe it's a kind of sound-bitey, kind of slightly trite thing, But data is infrastructure. You don't need the infrastructure if you don't have the data. I having a wonderful conversation with a colleague over lunch, and the thing I haven't said is data being like oil, because that's now decades old, blah, 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 blah. But it's right. You have to process it, you have to find it, you have to do things to it, you have to make it valuable or useful in the first instance. The difference being is that you can't reuse oil, whereas you can consistently reuse data, and reusing it and linking it is where even more value comes from. But if we want to make a difference, we have to put data first in some of those conversations and thoughts and actually treat it as part of the infrastructure. Thank you.